Mark, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for continuing to participate in this event. I thought that first panel was extremely interesting. The stage for this conversation that I hope we can have. The idea of the role that media plays in making elections fair, it's sort of fundamental. It's the sort of the core of that link between democracy and freedom of expression. And I think there have been a lot of good examples of elections and the role the media has played, the good and opening role and maybe not so good role that media has played in the last few years in Eurasia. So I hope that we will be able to unpack some of these questions and again have as informal a conversation as possible. Very quickly, I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. To my left is Łukasz Lipinski. He's the editor-in-chief of Polityka.pl, and he's a journalist, editor, and an expert on European issues at the Institute Europa. I think I got that correct. Then to his left is Vladarin Nikshutu. He's a correspondent for the Baltic Investigative Reporting Network, BIRN. He's been the Balkan Insights correspondent from Moldova since 2017, and he is a political and investigative journalist who specializes in Eastern Europe. My old friend Nune Sarkisyan is to his left. She's the managing director of the Media Initiative Center in Yerevan, and she's been doing that for over 23 years, and thank you very much for coming. And to her left is David Kanikia. He's an elections analyst at Golos in Russia. So thank you very much. I will start out by asking sort of a general question that hopefully will set the stage for all of the panelists to share some of their thoughts. Sort of what have been the biggest challenges for journalists in over the last recent election cycle in your country? So basically, let's talk about your context, your country, the elections that have happened most recently. What are the key actors, policymakers, civil society challenges? You know, the different people that are participating in this, the journalists, the international community. Who are those stakeholders, and how do they work together, and how does that reflect on the process? So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for coming here. I bet I usually want to know who is the audience, so I was told that most of the audience are journalists and NGOs people, right? If it's okay, so I'll try to be as practical as possible, and if you have any practical questions, please come up with them either during the panel or after the panel during the lunch or networking. I am a journalist for more than 20 years, and I worked for daily, weekly, internet page, and for analytical institution too. So I had some practice in covering elections because most of the time I was sort of political or international journalist. When I came here, have you seen that in the lobby there was a picture of Moldavian politics? Have you seen it? It's like two bags of motorcycles just heading against each other, and then two metal people hitting each other with hammers. And I think, well, I sent it to my friends to Poland. I said this could be very well the description of politics in every country recently, as we become very polarized. So the question which was given at the very beginning was, can journalism make elections fair? And I have a metaphor which is closer to football, I think, which is about football trainers. I mean, good trainer can make a very good team out of a good team, or quite good team out of average team, or average team out of bad team. But he cannot make a good team out of a very bad team. And the same goes with journalists. I mean, we're somewhere here, we are the salt, we journalists, we're the salt of the elections, but we are not the main dish, as we say, using another expression. So there is two extreme situations which are completely different and which are completely different universes. One of them is situation when you have a free and fair elections, in which you can mainly concentrate on the race and who's going to win and how. And the other opposite situation is when they are not free and fair, and then it doesn't matter because everyone knows who's going to win. But then, as a fair journalist, you should concentrate on irregularities and what's happening with democracy in your country. The most problematic situation is when the elections are partly fair and partly free. And this is the situation which is more and more often in many countries. So on one hand, you have a system which in theory is democratic and in theory is free, and then you have more and more different obstacles and different challenges which come into your way. I think, as the question was about major obstacles or major challenges, I think I should name three of them which are very important in recent time, and this is no surprise. One of them was already mentioned, is polarization. And this is something which is, on one hand we say, you know, what's wrong about polarization? I mean, politics is about fight of different options. The problem is that if these options take too much of that, if your country just divides to different camps, then it's very difficult to keep it together as something in common. I mean, if, and it happens in more and more times, even in more and more countries, even European Union, if you start losing the middle ground, something which should be between political forces, and this should be actually us, media, NGOs, academia, and so on, which can be engaged in political life, but not engaged as a part of political or party war. And this is a very important thing as a basic principle. I mean, you cannot have free media if you don't have media which at least, I mean, you can lean to specific side of politics, but you cannot be directly linked to political parties. If you are, you're then not becoming a part of media or becoming part of politics. Another one, there was a lot of talk about that, is the disinformation and use of modern technologies in politics, elections, and in media. There was quite a lot about it in last panel, so I won't talk too long about it. We are in the situation in which actual technology becomes a solution and a challenge at the same time, and this is definitely a big problem, and definitely a thing which won't be fixed in the short time. At the moment, we see that in the societies and in the electoral systems which are not strong, disinformation is actually taking bigger and bigger part, and this is I would call it a death danger to the democracy in these countries, as strong as corruption. So that's about it. And the third thing, which is for me very important to finish with, that very important thing for the media which want to sustain independent is their economical situation. So Dmitro, he was there, was talking about editor-in-chief and commercial director. Of course, commercial director shouldn't be telling editor-in-chief what he should write, but you should have a strong and good commercial director to keep your business floating and to have independent economic situation, because without independent economic situation, you cannot maintain the independent newsroom, and this is the basic thing. I know we all struggle with that. I mean, last years have disrupted the business models of all media, but we have more and more new models coming up with subscription, with people actually giving money to media as to charities, that can be helpful in this situation. And I think I'll stop with that, and I'll come up with some more details and examples in the second intervention.
Let me just ask a quick question, if that's okay. So tell us about Poland in the last elections. Give us a little bit of a quick snapshot so that we can refer to it in the rest of the discussion.
So, well, this is good example. I think the problem is not with the elections which we had, but with the election we will have, because Poland is an example of a country in which definitely we can learn that nothing is given for granted. And Poland was a country in which electoral system and media system was pretty strong, and we thought that we actually did take it for granted. And recently, as we have the right-wing populist party in power, then there is some aspects which compromise this thing, and one of them concerns the public media. Public media in Poland actually became the part of the government propaganda. You can also have a lot of resources engaged in political campaigns coming from the state companies. So you see that even if and in Poland the legal framework, and we thought that the whole system was pretty strongly introduced and pretty working, and you see that if you have powers of this kind, then system can start to rot. So from this point of view, it's very interesting how, of course, we have we have a strong opposition party in Poland. We have strong independent media too. We have some media owned by foreign companies from Germany and US too, which are pretty independent at the same time. So it's going to be very interesting how it plays out. But if there is one lesson coming from recent developments in Poland, is that you cannot take anything for granted, and you need to fight every day for what's been built in our country.
I'll speak in Romanian because it's much more easier for me. Ce trebuie spus despre România, în primul rând, este că vom avea, practic asistăm la calmul dinaintea furtunii, deoarece în 2019, practic în aproximativ 2 săptămâni, vor fi organizate alegerile europarlamentare, care va fi primul pas din acest ciclu. Urmează apoi alegeri prezidențiale, undeva în luna noiembrie-decembrie acestui an, și la anul vom avea alegeri parlamentare și alegeri locale. Practic, așa cum am mai spus, asistăm la calmul dinaintea furtunii, deși există o serie de semne, cum că partidul de guvernământ, practic, și cel puțin în rapoartele interne ale mass mediei din România, există această observație că partidul de guvernământ își întărește pozițiile, cumpără influență și devine din ce în ce mai restrictiv din punctul de vedere al libertății presei. Cred că toată Europa a văzut ce s-a întâmplat în august 2018 la București, în Piața Victoriei, atunci când, la oaltă cu protestatarii, și jurnaliștii au fost bătuți practic de jandarmerie, și acest lucru cred că e o pată negativă în ceea ce privește România și spune foarte multe despre cam ce urmează să avem, poate anul acesta sau poate la anul, din acest punct de vedere. De asemenea, vedem și o altă fațetă a presei din România, și anume că anumiți jurnaliști din România intră în politică, și avem 2 exemple la europarlamentare. Un candidat din partea care deschide practic lista Partidului Național Liberal de centru-dreapta, Și avem, pe de o parte, o altă jurnalistă de investigații care merge în tabăra social-democraților de centru-stânga. Deci sunt mai multe aspecte care vor determina practic cursul lucrurilor. Vedem de asemenea și din partea instituțiilor de stat din România o restricționare a accesului la informații. Probabil sună foarte cunoscut pentru jurnaliștii din Moldova acest lucru. Avem exemplele Ministerelor Sănătății și Educației, de exemplu, care au ales un alt tip de comunicare și nu mai răspund la solicitările clasice pe legea 544 pe 2001 privind accesul liber la informații de interes public. La fel și din partea, de exemplu, a Primăriei Bucureștiului, care a ales la fel să comunice numai prin comunicate și să nu răspundă unor solicitări de presă. Deci vedem practic o îngreunare, o descurajare a jurnaliștilor pentru a obține informații de interes public. Se intră într-o logică de campanie, așa cum spuneam, și pericolul cel mai mare este îngrădirea accesului la informație și probleme ce țin de organizarea acestor alegeri. Mai mult decât atât, există un pericol și din partea presei de opoziție, ca să spun așa, sau a presei care este critică la adresa guvernului, și anume să cadă în narativul opoziției orbește. Și acolo observăm o serie de probleme din această categorie și per total, peisajul nu este cel mai favorabil. Am vorbit mai devreme, Luca și-a vorbit despre Polonia, vorbim despre Ungaria și ce se întâmplă acolo și probabil România din păcate, o spun cu regret, dar probabil va fi, sau cel puțin se îndreaptă spre același tip de guvernare. Toate acestea puse cap la cap nu creează un peisaj favorabil presei din România, care se confruntă cu tot mai multe probleme de acest gen, de la amenințări, practic de la bătaie, la modul cel mai fizic, în august 2018, până la amenințări chiar cu moartea. O jurnalistă din România de investigații, care anchetează o serie de false doctorate a unor oameni politici din România, a primit o amenințare cu moartea. Poliția a investigat acest caz și a ajuns la concluzia că cel care făcuse amenințarea era chiar un fost polițist. Deci ne confruntăm cu tot felul de astfel de probleme și cred că lucrurile nu se îndreaptă într-o direcție bună.
If you could please.
I can do this. Oh, yeah. I can try to continue actually. I always have in mind that also the example, not from the football, which was very good by the way, but from the literature, that all unhappy families, it's from Tolstoy, yeah, all unhappy families are unhappy on their own way, and or happy are the similar. So here almost the same about a lot of our countries, but in the same time there are a lot of differences on some specific moments of the history or of the social political history in our society. So I don't know how much you have been following the situation in Armenia, but all last years, I would say 2017 and 2018, we had a kind of a constant elections. Doesn't mean that we had this daily, but actually from 2017, when we had the parliamentarian elections, we had passed a lot of very serious, dramatic, and very positive changes in our country. So it started literally in 2017 when the parliament has been elected, and after that the transition from the presidential to the prime minister type of the governance, then the election of the new prime minister, which was de facto the previous power and previous government, and then the Velvet Revolution in April-May 2018. And now it's 1 year passed after that, and during that period of time we have been in a situation of a constant changes and constant elections. In fact, yes, our elections, which in fact took place in this were the snap elections, snap parliamentarian elections in December 2018, they started in April of 2018 when the revolution started. Because people were very ready from that moment, even without any kind of hope that this revolution could be possible, they were very ready for possible changes. And the main goal of the newly elected government, I don't want to go very deep into all these details, of course, but the main goal, one of the main goals were to make the media free and independent. And of course, this statement was very positively accepted by the civil society. It was partly well accepted by the media, strangely, because I guess that the biggest challenge for the media in our country was the freedom itself. When you have a media which during the last 20 years has passed a lot of different type of pressure, violation, different type of institutional pressings, institutional opportunity to control, it's very difficult to try to have them free in 1 month. It's even impossible to do this in 1 year, and I hope it will be possible to do this in 5 years at least. But it means that the media itself is starting to go through the different stresses also. And here I want also to refer to my colleague from Poland that it's very important to have a free market. And if you don't have it, even if you are very open for giving a freedom and independence and a lot of different tools of professionalism to media, it will not be possible. Because media outlets who are looking for, who had owners in a different forms during many years, they would start to look for another owner, and they not always will find them, let's say, in those parts of society who really want to share this intention of the new government to make freedom of media sustainable. So, coming back to the December and the election period itself, I would say that it was really very important for the society and for the government, and of course for those journalists who are representing the responsible journalism, to have the elections which will be really fair during many years of the Armenian history. And it happened. It really happened, because we had a lot of really very important, I would say that unprecedented changes and unprecedented events which happened during the elections. Despite the situation when, for example, the electoral code, the new electoral code which was suggested by a different civil society organization, has not been adopted by the parliament, which was also clear because the majority of the parliament were people from the previous government, from the Republican Party. This was the previous political power in the country, and of course during several months it was a very strange political situation. I would say it was a serious political internal crisis which was very strangely overcome, and actually strangely it was actually passed, because we had a lot of very dangerous situation in the political system in the country, yeah, of course. So despite of this not adopted new electoral code with some changes also for the media, we had several things like, for example, debates on public TV, which were very, very positive themselves, and we also, as an organization, with our donors, supported these debates, the part of them at least. And in general, the short-time reformation, the practical reformation of the public TV, which was also very strange, and it has been done in a framework of the previous management, which is also an interesting sign, because it means that finally, if you give to professional people some kind of a values and framework and political will, it's possible actually to let them work according to some kind of professional standards. We had a very balanced, coverage of the political party by the TV companies, at least those who were under the monitoring, and they are the biggest TV companies. And this is despite of the lot of challenges in the ownership of these companies. So the result was really positive. We had less fair situation in the regional TV companies, and this was also very understandable. During the first session, we have been talking about the digitalization in Moldova. I was surprised that it hasn't been finalized yet, because in Armenia, this digitalization started started 10 years ago, and this was a very politicized process, which actually negatively influenced on regional TV companies first. And now we have a really small TV companies which are very much in a crisis, and this one may be the priority now for the civil society and for the parliament, try to change the TV and radio law. And maybe this was one of the problems why the situation in regions were not so much balanced as in capital. There are also a lot of other political and social and economic issues as well, of course, but let's actually go with these circumstances which had been created after the revolution. The last thing maybe which I would mention, that journalists really started to demonstrate how good reporters they are, again, during the revolution. But being a reporter doesn't mean that they can and they have an ability to go really deep into the coverage of all these issues and give a lot of details to the public and try to explain what is going on, of course. And they were also kind of they had also some kind of had an obstacle. The law was some kind of an obstacle also to go deeper, because trying to cover something which is deeper than a part of a political advertising, it means that they are continuing the political advertising. And this is also something which maybe should be taken into the consideration for the future. So maybe I will stop here, and then I can answer some other.
So first of all, I would like to say thank you for Freedom House for opportunity to take part in this interesting discussion. We already talked a lot about interference of Russia in elections, about Russian propaganda and how it's working. The Russian state spend a lot of effort, spend a lot of resources to interfere in political processes all over the world, and that's not a big secret. And there are a lot of talks that we need some kind of restriction, some kind of protection against this influence. In my opinion, it can be dangerous, it can be tricky road, and now I try to explain why. Because this is the way like Russian state active inside the country. For example, we don't have independent media in Russia almost 15 years, in traditional way of understanding of this word. All mass media belong to the state or to oligarchs that close to the state. And people almost, a lot of people, they not trust information on the state media. They try to search information somewhere else. They go to internet, they go to social networks, and now the most influenced media resources, independent media resources are in internet, not on TV, not on the radio. They have web pages, and of course it's bloggers. Some bloggers, some political bloggers are much more popular than TV stations that cover the whole country. So what Russian state tried to do with this? They create law. They create a lot of laws that ruin freedom of speech in Russia. I can mention 5 of these laws. For example, law of foreign agents. This law not allowed NGOs to receive finance, to receive support from international society, and they make life of NGOs much more complicated than it can be. Other law is a law of, it's really strange to explain, unwishable organization. So some kind of organizations in Russia by the name of the state can be wishable and other unwishable. And if you will spread information from this unwishable organization, you can be jailed. We have a few criminal cases then people for sharing information, for example, from Open Russia movement, which found by Khodorkovsky. They already under criminal cases. So just imagine, for sharing something on Facebook, you can be jailed. And other three new laws that we have right now is a law for unrespect of the power. If you criticize power, it also can be something that you will have problems. And to another law of a fake news. That's something that there are a lot of discussions on the West, how to fight for the fake news. Russian state already know how to fight with the fake news inside Russia. So if you publish something that state don't like, you will deal with Russian court, and you will know that your information will be fake, no matter is it true or not. We already have these cases. And the last one, law that now passing the parliament, is a law about protecting internet from the foreign influence. It's something new, something that gives state possibility to switch off Facebook, switch off YouTube, switch off Twitter and all other resources that state don't like. So that's why now in Russia it's really hard to have freedom of speech. It's dangerous. And now journalists, bloggers, they start to think what's it allowed to say and what is not allowed. So that's why, that's first I want to mention, you need to be really clear what you're doing, because when you start to, all these restrictions, start fighting with the fake, you never know where it will lead you. And I can understand why it happened inside Russia, and I think it's really important, but I think we can do it a little bit later. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So that was very interesting because we really saw a real spectrum of issues that came up. You know, from a consolidated democratic society in Poland finding itself being caught by surprise, and the fear of well, what next? What if we're not paying attention? What if we're not protecting our rights? What could happen? To sort of the maybe another example of something that's maybe very similar in this part of the world. And you talked about Romania, but I think that would also be true for Moldova. It could be, we could talk about Ukraine, we could talk about Georgia, we could talk about other countries where there is basically the ability to say what you want to say, but all sorts of ways to manipulate that, all sorts of ways to take sides in a political campaign, and we can talk about that a little bit more. And then the good example, and one of the questions I wanted to ask from Nune in her example of sort of a refreshing, you know, improvement, that moment of change that we've all experienced at some time or another. It seems to be everyone's experienced at some time or another, but it hasn't always gone well. This idea of, you know, is the media playing a watchdog role? Are they being critical enough of the new government? Is the government being held accountable for its policies? Or are people too afraid of sabotaging this positive change by playing this fundamental role? And really, how did that happen? I know the elections were, you know, very quick, and you know, how competitive were they? And how could you, in a situation where there's just a massive wave of a new political force coming into power, how can journalists then play a critical role? So I'd be interested in hearing more about that. And then, of course, then we go down to Russia, which is, we didn't talk about Russian elections, and maybe the next time when you speak, I'd like to hear more about that. But this raft of laws that we've been seeing, not only affecting freedom of expression and freedom of speech in Russia, but affecting the rest of us. And I think that was a point well taken about if you start restricting and start legislating what's fake news, you know, that's a road we need to be very cautious about. And I think we talked about that a little bit in the last session. So maybe the first question I'll ask, and if you could all sort of speak on this, and we can, you know, mess up the order if you like. We don't need to be so rigid. How can you have an independent media or media that is going to play its responsible role during election period when the budget for those media organizations is 5 or 10 times larger than the media market could endure. I mean, that the ownership, it's not just a question of ownership, it's a question of budgets, where I think pretty much in all of these cases, oligarchs are spending way more money on their television stations than they're getting in return. And how can you talk about having any independence with a situation like that? And how does that work in your countries and the countries that you're thinking about?
Maybe start. My colleagues will continue. Continuing the creative determinations, actually revolution in Armenia hasn't been stopped yet. It's continuing, of course, and in media is the same situation. Now when the elections in the past already, and now we see the process which also is very much complicated by the very positive steps of the new government as a fight against corruption and the several court trials, particularly against the second president of Armenia, etc., which was also, by the way, connected with the election case. Let me not go too deep into that. Of course, there are a lot of challenges which media face. And since the media face, people face these challenges also, because what for media exists? It exists only to give an information to media and to public. And if they don't execute this main task actually, so it means that they are useless in the country. So that's why there are a lot of problems which are coming again to the problems of the media literacy, of the fake news, of the very strong influence of the digital platforms and social networks, etc. So talking about the media, we have this huge problem of the ownership and the transparency of the ownership. And this is maybe one very important task which civil society, again, together with our current parliament, should try to solve. And this is not very easy, although the actually the models of the transparent ownership has been implemented in the different industrial field in Armenia, like for example the mining industry, and it could be used for the media, but this still needs a large discussion within the civil society and with the media. And of course there are a lot of resistance from the media outlets and from their real current and the former owners. One of the problems in this, of course, depends, as I already mentioned, of the market itself. So when from they should find the money? Advertising. The economy in Armenia is still suffering, it's very weak, and the advertising market is extremely small for the terrible amount of the media outlets in our country. So subscription, people, actually, the level of the poverty is very low in Armenia, very high in Armenia, and it's also not very easy to try to install this. And there are some media outlets who try to do some crowdfunding, some subscription mechanism, but it's not very successful. Sponsorship, it's again come to the very much political influence, and also there are not enough very beneficiary laws which actually help to different oligarchs or different businessmen, let's use this word here, who really want to invest into the independent media, but they don't have any kind of exemptions, some tax exemptions, etc. So any kind of situation which motivate them and give them incentive to help media without any wish to have a political influence. And what else? Donor money? Yeah, it's very important, but should we think about this as a sustainable mechanism? I'm not sure. I think we should think that as a supportive mechanism, and unfortunately it's impossible to imagine media in Armenia, and I'm afraid that also in other countries which are represented here, without any kind of donor support. But here we are also coming to the changes of the attitude of the society to that, which is also very important. So ownership is one of the biggest issues. The former political influences and the connections of the people from the media outlets. This is also another problem. And this is sometimes very personal, which became very institutional, and it's very difficult sometimes to avoid it, because there are a lot of really connections with some former political groups, which, you know, you can think that it could be very positive, because now we have a situation in Armenia where the most TV companies owned by the opposition, because de facto the former government is former political parties are current opposition. And I would say that from the, let's say, structural point of view, it's very positive, if they are not trying just to spoil it, and they are not trying to manipulate it. And unfortunately, this is very much the case now in Armenia. And that's why it's, of course, creating again the kind of a polarization towards the attitude to the situation in the media. The third reason, actually, that there is a kind of somebody said that actually the technological and digital revolution, it could be challenge and opportunity in the same time, yeah? So our current government and our current political elite actually used social media and Facebook very actively. And on some moments, social networks replaced TV, replaced the traditional media outlets. And of course, media started to complain about the lack of the communication with the current government, and trying to complain that government tried to neutralize the media. There are actually some reasons to talk about this, because of course when the government is changing, people are changing, the communication is suffering from that, and there are people who are new, they don't always know how to do this. But I think that media should take into consideration that the digital revolution is bringing a lot of challenges, and they should start to think about that. It's very important to get some press releases, to get some official information from the government, but media is not about that. Media about the trying to criticize this, trying to investigate this, trying to go deeper, trying to find different opinions about that. And so this is what also media in Armenia should understand finally, and at least those who try to complain. So, and I am afraid that there will be also a lot of other challenges, also legal challenges, and again coming back to the fake news. This is a very huge problem now in Armenia, but I'm afraid that its problem is viewed like a big one only from our side of our small country, because it's a huge problem around the world. And from my point of view, what should we do for trying to overcome this? My recipe actually it's education in general and media education particularly. And even if maybe it sounds very idealistically, I'm sometimes also criticized in Armenia to being a little bit more idealistic and not being very strong in my fight against the fake news. But I think that, again, this is a kind of a challenge, and you should try to live with this, and you still try to give much more opportunity for the education generally in your government. So maybe I will stop here.
Yeah, I'll try to come back to original question, which was the budget question. I mean, how to work in the situation when you have a lot of money transferred into the market through the oligarchs or through the state television, and how to get through. Well, I use example of my country because it's the easiest thing, and as you said, this famous quote, the happy families are dissimilar and the unhappy are all in different ways. There are two things which I need to say at the start about Polish media markets. We have two good things about it. One of them that we don't have oligarchs, because Polish market is actually too big to create someone who is big enough to influence it totally. So we are the country which is luckily without these guys, and we are pretty happy about it. And the other thing is that it's, well, comparably with our region, it's pretty rich. So it's quite a lot of people who are actually paying for different media. So this is the market which actually can sustain a lot of different outlets. So maybe what I say, it's not completely possible to do in this country, but I'll give you actually the very concrete example of something which is, I would say, reinventing the press in the modern era, which is a new, quite comparably new webpage in Poland called Oko Press, the Eye. So this is a service which is trying to be at the same time, and you will find it a little bit puzzling, being at one side being activist, political activist, and at the same time fact checkers, which is something Mitro said, if he's still here now, fact checking and campaigning, this is something which actually they do. And this was created by a completely new service which was started by two big media, Gazeta Wyborcza Daily and Polityka My Weekly, but actually now it is fully sponsored by people who are just, paying money, not even subscriptions, but paying money as for charity for this organization. You might say that fact-checking and activism are from different paradigms, but this is actually how the press started. The whole press, it's coming together of two traditions. One was traditions of the letters from ports, which said, this kind of grains cost here in Amsterdam this, and this kind of grains cost in Gdansk that, and Venice, some other stuff cost this. So this was one part of the origin of the press. And another one was actually the political pamphlet from the era of French Revolution. And the whole concept of press was getting these two things together, so getting objective or at least neutral information of different prices in different ports, and then political commentaries on King, who was, a bad thing, or Jacobins, who were bad things, right? So, so what I wanted to say by this example is that as technology becomes a challenge, at the same time, internet lowers very significantly the entry-level barrier to the market. I mean, before that, to create a newspaper or a television or a radio station, you need really a lot of money. Now, if you have a message, if you find the people who follow it, then it's much easier to start something which is significant on the market. And Oko Press is now one of the most important voices in public debates in Poland, even though its budget, it's, I think, less than 1% of the budget of the average television. So, even in difficult situation, there are two ways. When you have a message, when you follow the reader, find the reader, to do something which is significant.
Let me make just a comment on that, if you don't mind. Because I remember a time 20 years ago, or 18 years ago, when the budgets for television stations in this region were dramatically lower. And while the quality was terrible, and you often saw people playing the guitar to fill their time because they didn't have the money to produce high quality content, more or less they were sustainable through their own advertising revenues. Even though they complained about how difficult it was to get, they were selling ads for parikmacheri and restaurants and wedding announcements, and that was enough, at least for teeny tiny regional stations, to support a news program. But we could extrapolate that to something that's more reasonable now in another era. And then suddenly some oligarchs came in and just destroyed the market. And I know in Georgia that happened in 2003 when Badri Patarkachishvili invested $35 million into Imedi television station, when that very same year the entire advertising market was about $1 million. And just completely destroyed the market. And I think that's happened throughout the region. So is there a way, following your comment about how the amount of money needed to enter the market, is there a way for us to go back, maybe through regulatory means, maybe using laws, to go back to a time when, in fact, you require news programming to be self-financing in some way or another? that it doesn't matter how much money goes to everything else in that television station, but that somehow or you make it so that you level the playing field so that there's independent sources for news? Or is that just idealistic nonsense? What do you guys think?
Cred că atunci când vorbim de piața media și dacă ar putea primi bani de la stat, cred că răspunsul este nu, pentru că avem deja radiodifuzorii publici, da? Care primesc bani pentru a ne informa corect. Cel puțin asta e cazul României. Dacă vorbim de România, rapoartele interne pe media arată faptul că presa, partidul de guvernământ finanțează o parte foarte mare a presei, iar raportul cu cealaltă parte, presa opoziției și presa independentă, pentru că eu le categorizez în 3 feluri, este inegal. Dar, în orice criză, cred că este și o oportunitate și în România s-a văzut acest lucru, astfel că în ultimii ani am asistat la apariția tot mai multe instituții media independente care se autofinanțează sau, vorbind pe șleau, vânează granturi. Și acestea sunt Rise, Recorder, Casa Jurnalistului sau mai nou inclusiv .ro. Sunt grupuri mici de jurnaliști care au ales să nu mai facă parte din redacții care ar putea avea o politică editorială politizată și și-au făcut practic propriile instituții media care funcționează și prind din ce în ce mai mult. Strategia lor a fost să meargă în special pe partea de social media, să-și promoveze materialele în acest mediu, iar succesul lor este cuantificabil și este din ce în ce mai mare. Deci dacă am putea să vorbim despre o alternativă la media clasică, în cazul României există acest model care se conturează a fi un succes. De asemenea, am vorbit despre fact-checking. Există instituții de fact-checking și în România, precum Funky Citizens, care este format din activiști, sau factual.ro din foști jurnaliști. Deci există și această tendință de a verifica mai bine informația și de a o expune apoi pe piața media. Cam acesta ar fi tabloul din România vis-a-vis de sursele alternative și cum să facem media independentă sau nepolitizată.
So I would like to take a step back and talk about elections. In 2018 we have presidential elections, and it was really important elections for Russia. As I already mentioned, we have a strong civil society in Russia and a lot of people observing these elections. We have thousands of volunteers who go to the polling stations and find something. I will talk about this a little bit later. So for the Putin it was some kind of referendum, because he not allowed to campaign for his strong opponents like Navalny and all other candidates. They was not popular, they was weak, and it was referendum. So people of the country should stay, trust this president or not. And the Kremlin make a task for themselves to get 50% of population supporting Putin. In the end, official result was that 55% vote for him. And the official turnout was 72%, and supporting of Putin 76%. In the end, it's 51-52% of population. So, but how they did it? It was huge media campaign, and all TV say supporting Putin, and so on, so on, so on. But in the end, it was not enough. We know that official turnout, real turnout, is something around 20-25%. It's how many people vote, because a lot of people not trust in elections in Russia. They know to vote, they don't even go to the polling station. That's true. And all other results, it's administrative resource and falsifications. So we have live broadcasting in Russia. I know that in Moldova it's also first time was used in these elections and parliament elections, but it was made on this strange way, because it's not showing what happened at the polling station, it's not showing face of voters. In Russia we have it on the other way. We have two cameras that show whole polling station and show ballot box. So you can count how many people vote. And we have some kind of project. A lot of people spend thousand hours watching these records from the polling station and calculate real turnout. So for example, small republic on the North Caucasus, Kabardino-Balkaria, it's only 356 polling stations. Official turnout, 91%. Putin support, 96%. Amazing. Everyone in Kabardino-Balkaria supports president. So we take 84 polling stations, 25% of all polling stations in Kabardino-Balkaria, and calculate the real turnout. It's really hard job, and people for each polling station you need 6-7 hours to calculate how many people vote. And it's amazing project that never have done before. It take 1 year, but results was amazing. 84 polling stations, none of them real turnout and official turnout match. Middle difference in each polling station, 900 votes. In some polling station, falsification is more than 2,000 votes, just in one polling station, imagine it. So then we calculate real turnout is 25%, and real support of the Putin is 66% less than official. So that's how they did elections. Okay, it's not in the whole country. In Moscow it's different, but in some republic, in some regions, in some national republics. So 66% of the people did not vote, but someone voted for them. That's why we really like these video cameras, we like these records, and that's why how civil society of Russia, how people of Russia really what they really think about what happened in internal policy, in international policy. State tried to do everything, just create visibility that it gets support of majority of the people. In the truth, people say nothing. They not support or they support, we don't know. They're not coming on the polling station. Real people not vote. They just stay home and someone vote for them. So that's why I'm optimistic about what will happen in Russia, because it can't take long. Or maybe it can, but I hope it will not. And that's why I want to say that civil society of Russia and Russian citizens and Russian states, it's a little bit different things. And it's not necessary to, when you talk to Russia, you need to understand that it can be two Russian society and Russian officials. And they have different purpose, different view how countries should, in which way countries should go. Thanks.
Maybe I will try also to give some notes about this, because I think it's very important to understand, can we go back? Was this your question? I think, of course, no, and we should not go back, we should go forward all the time. But why? Because we have also different expectations now. We have a different acceptance of the news, of the quality, and even if we are complaining about our society very often, but our society became a little bit more media literate. They became much more educated about the media, even if we know that there are still a lot of problems. But since we know much more about the media, and especially in some countries, like for example in Armenia, I'm afraid that everywhere everybody thinks that they really can judge how media should work, which is true in fact. And also in Armenia, during last several months, people became a media themselves, because social network gave this opportunity to people. And so we also actually have this kind of a slogan that the people are the media right now. And you can't do anything with this, yeah? So that's why the structure of the media, the landscape of the media is very much changing right now. So, and which is very important also, if we come back from the romantic understanding and exception of this to the more practical field, so it's very important to realize actually that the competition is very high, is very tough in especially small markets and small countries. So that's why we can't do the same which has been done, but we should think about the other ways of the financing, of the resources. And there are a lot of, by the way, new sites in Armenia, and they are actually creating every day. And it's very easy to open up a media outlet in Armenia. We have, and we always had, by the way, one of the most liberal mass media law in country. But it's very difficult then to make this sustainable. So that's why you always have to find a balance.
I'm going to hold out a little bit for my idealistic idea, but I don't think, of course, we're going to go back. But I do think that new models, no, of course I'm trying to be provocative, but new models can come out based on the experience of the past. And we can be looking at what worked in the past, what was the last time we actually had some independence of our media, and try to figure out, given the current situation and the level of competition and all of the rest, what could be done. We need to break out of this idea that we're accepting the fact that our media has been completely bought up by economic powers. I mean, we can't, that is not, if that's the case, we're basically giving up on our democracies. And I think we can't do that. So, given the fact that we're not giving up on our democracies right now, and we have this situation where the media markets have been basically co-opted in one way or another, it's all about the professionalism of the media. It's about journalism ethics. It's about what they are supposed to do. How can they be independent? How can they manage as professional actors in this? So I'd like to ask you guys about that. What are the roles and responsibilities of journalists during an election period? What is their relationship to truth, to perception, and to objectivity? What's the difference between news and opinion? Some of these fundamental questions that we ask journalists in journalism schools are the things that we're returning to. So I'd like to actually hear something from you about, what is possible, without being naive, but at the same time, of course we know that there's a huge amount of self-censorship. We know that people lose their jobs for telling the truth and all of the rest. So given these constraints, what can journalists do? So let's try to be thinking positively on that, in that regard. Yeah, so please, I leave the floor to all of you.
So maybe I'll start. Well, as it has been said, of course, the conditions in different countries of our region are very different. So it's I mean, we have our problems now in Poland, but it's well comparatively easy to get good, to give you good advice in the situation in which the conditions which are in the other countries can be much worse than in Poland. So maybe not all the knowledge we have could be that much practical to you, but even though. Answering the question on professionalism and objectivity, truth and neutrality, that was the question. I mean, what I think the most it's done? Yeah. So I think the most successful projects in Poland we have, and one of them I already mentioned, were done in combining these two things. I mean, the traditional, very traditional quality journalism plus new technologies. And another example in Poland is the main daily in the country, which is Gazeta Wyborcza, which actually made its digital transformation during the last 5 years into a company which is really, I mean in real terms, digital first. They have now, I think, they sell less than 100,000 copies of the paper, and they have 150,000 subscriptions, meaning that they have actually more people paying for the newspaper in the internet than buying in kiosks, which was achieved by actually trying to maintain comparatively high still standard of the news. So the future, at least in the market, is for combining these two advantages. One of them, high quality of news, and second, the knowledge of the modern technologies. If you ask the question, about objectivity, impartiality, neutrality of the media. Well, I think, well, I have two answers. One of them is that the media cannot be, never can be 100 objective, and it comes from the nature of the things. If I wanted to write an objective story about this room, and I would forget about, for example, this poster of Freedom House, it wouldn't be objective, right? Our role, at least in the information materials, is to be impartial, right? And this is something we need to understand. When we give information, we shouldn't take part of any sides, and we should give fair chance to speak out for any side of the political sphere. And this is our duty. So this is one thing. And second thing is I mean, there's also a question of truth. I mean, because some people say that we're living in the times of post-truth, where if it's post-truth, then you know, we cannot go on with our job. I mean, we, at least I, still stick to the fact that there is a truth. I mean, there is something as close to truth as can be regarded as truth, and we need to try find the way towards it. There's another sphere, of course. I'm perfectly okay with media outlets which are leaning to the sides of political groups. I mean, you can think, you know, even in British tradition, there is in British politics, there is a tradition that on the day of elections, all the newspapers say, okay, in our opinion, this time you should vote Labour, or this time you should vote Conservative. And this is also okay because you know that this commentary of your newspaper, right? But you cannot get institutionally connected into political party, because then you stop being journalists, you become politicians. That's it.
Am și eu un comentariu vis-a-vis de neutralitate și imparțialitate. Cred că datoria noastră și singurul nostru stăpân ca și jurnaliști trebuie să fie opinia publică, publicul. De aceea cred că atunci când ești obiectiv, imparțial și neutru în relatarea știrilor, vei câștiga pe termen lung. Vorbeam de surse de finanțare și vorbeam mai devreme de crowdfunding. Dacă nu arăți o imparțialitate, obiectivitate, neutralitate în știrile tale sau în materialele de presă, să spun mai generic, nu putem vorbi de un model de autosusținere. Astfel, odată ce ești imparțial și dovedești acest lucru pe termen lung, atunci vor veni și sursele de finanțare ca alternativă la ce s-a întâmplat până atunci. Deci cred că acesta poate fi un model. Nu este numai un model, este și o datorie a fiecărui jurnalist să fie imparțial și să-și facă treaba așa cum ar fi în interesul public. Și acest lucru trebuie să fie principalul motiv care ne ghidează în activitatea noastră.
I think that the idea of the journalism hasn't been changed. The methods has been changed. So we still are thinking about being professional. What it means, actually it's reflected in a different code of ethics, which, God bless, exists in many countries and many professional societies. And even if they are changing, and most of them are changing because of a digital revolution and digital influence and digital changes in all these countries, and of course you have to take into consideration a new method of the distribution of information, and but still you still have professional values. And yes, I agree that the word objective maybe it's not the best because it doesn't actually reflect what journalists are doing, and sometimes in a very paralyzed from also the value point of view societies in which we are living. To be a fully objective, sometimes it means that you are not protecting fair, you are not protecting those people who need your protection, etc. So there are a lot of ethical choices, by the way, when we are starting to think about this. But trying really to be professional and trying to continue to ensure that any election should be finally a fair, it's very important, and I think it will not change, I hope, in next 3 years at least.
So we live in the new reality, we live in the digital world, and everything changed so fast, and journalism, media also changed so fast. Now when we have so many information, each link gives us something new, and it's so complicated to make a choice what to read. Usually people read nothing, they just watching headlines, and that's all. In this new reality, it's really complicated to stay professional for the journalist, to keep high-level standards and to fight for these standards. Because now, in this new reality, who will be more popular? There will those who will loud, I don't know how to say, who will say more louder. And no one cares about details. No one read long reads. That's a huge problem, I think. It's also same with election. I feel a little bit strange because I've been international observer in all countries that our partners, our speakers representative, and also in Moldova. And in each country it was a different situation also with media. So, and especially for me it's a good case Armenia, because I was in 2012 and in this year on the parliamentary election. It's two different countries, two different words exactly, and also with media. Sorry, I will speak directly. In 2012, Armenians were like, they not believe in themselves. They were something like this way, yes. And now after revolution, they proud of themselves. But not so many things change. Just people fight for their rights, and that's all. And that changed whole situation, even in such a short period of time. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. We have some time for questions, and then after questions, I'll give everybody a chance to make a quick summary. Please.
Sergiu Aurelian. Dacă se poate, o să dau o întrebare în limba rusă, anume pentru domnul David. Я хочу задать на русском, чтобы лучше вы поняли и чтобы могли лучше объяснить. В свете того, что вот здесь мы разговаривали, то есть предыдущая сессия, объясняли нам, какие есть тенденции к тому, чтобы мы попали под цензуру. Вот в свете этого, что вы скажете насчет того, что в России уже приняло, законодательное собрание уже приняло закон о выходе русского интернета из общего интернета? И как вы прокомментируете, что именно в России опять через закон обязали всех операторов сотовой сети передавать данные о тех людях, которые переписываются в разных мессенджерах, Twitter, Facebook, неважно каких. То есть пропадает абсолютная анонимность, и в моем понимании пропадает само понятие свободы слова. Как вы прокомментируете? И я хочу, чтобы ваш комментарий, чтобы остальные участники данной сессии, чтобы поняли и соизмерили, к чему может привести цензура, даже если она применяется в лучших понятиях, их понятиях в лучших.
Thank you so much for the question. That's already I talked in the beginning, that if you start this way to censorship internet, start censorship media, it's so complicated to stop. That's what we saw in Russia. You're absolutely right about this law, this legislation base that state creates for protect. In the end, they do only for one reason: to protect themselves and keep themselves to the power. If State can't say nothing about level of life in the country. If they stand nothing, they can't say nothing about relationships with other countries. What can they do? They can just shut up those who against. That's why they do all this legislation, all this law, they create all this. And another important problem is, how it's in English, anonymous in internet. Because as you mentioned, yes, now they try to make all providers, that all providers need to share information about correspondence between users in the social network. As for me, I faced with this situation during presidential elections in Russia last year. So I was one of the targets of black PR campaign. And on the Central TV, on the TV channel NTV, 2 days before election day, they show movie about our movement, Golos. And one of the persons who was mentioned in this movie was me. And they published my private talks with my father, and they changed them in the way like it's can't even possible to imagine. Like I'm not a patriot, like I'm American, or I don't know who else, Georgian or Ukrainian spy, and that was my words. Of course, I'm not saying this, they just change everything. And they publish on the Central TV on the Friday night, not candidate debates, a movie about bad observers. That's really dangerous. If you not have a privacy of the talk, that can be, you start to correct yourself, what you talk even in the private talks, and that's really, really unpleasant.
Добрый день. Я представляю Союз поляков в Молдавии. И хочу сказать то, что мы в Союзе поляков считаем нужным развивать и продвигать на местном уровне самые передовые современные издания, в которых отражаются свобода и демократия. Это в первую очередь интернет-издания, потому что время печатной продукции проходит. И сейчас все больше внимания уделяют интернет-изданиям, в которых можно многое узнать. Особенно много можно узнать на сайте издания американских ветеранов, American Veterans. Кто с кем ведет войну, как передвигаются авианосцы. Это самая демократичная, самая передовая информация. И мы вот думаем открыть в Молдавии представительство сайта американских ветеранов и сделать так, чтобы этот сайт был переведен и на румынский язык. Мой вопрос такой, а как вот вы думаете, у вас в ваших странах есть и распространен ли сайт американских ветеранов? Спасибо большое.
Anybody want to respond to that? Nothing to say. Okay. Any other questions?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for your great input on the monitoring of the electoral process. My name is Tristan Slobodanuk, and in the recent parliamentary elections, I helped a member of parliament run in the elections. And one of the headaches, or one of the issues we faced, was the fact that media platforms would present wrong information to the public, and I would call them and ask them to fix that, and they would fix that in some articles, and then they would misrepresent information in some other articles. So my question to the panelists, especially to Mr. Lipinski, who talked about impartiality and neutrality of media, my question is, how do we ensure that impartiality and neutrality of media platforms, but also how would we ensure that those media platforms collect the right kind of information, and they collect the information for the trusted sources? Thank you.
That was directed to me. I think, well, there are two answers for your question. One is short-term, one is long-term, and I don't know if it works out in 100%. Short-term, I mean, you need to have, if a newspaper or media, any media publishes which is just outright lie, you should have a legal system which works. I'm definitely against engaging penal law. So no penal law, no arrests, but civil law cases, and that should be system which actually works, especially during the election period. I don't know what's your system here. In Poland there is a system that actually in the election period, because we're talking about election period, requires courts to do decision on a case in 24 hours, and then if the parties don't agree, then you have a second chance, another 24 hours. So all that stuff should be set in 48 hours if there is wrong information. So short term, during the election, this is the enforceable legal system, because legal system should not only be in books, but also should be enforced by, especially by courts, right? In this case. So anyway, the law enforcement, this is very important thing. I mean, well, many people here remember communist times when the law in books were perfect, and then the enforcement was completely different direction. Someone said that, the difference was like between a chair and an electric chair, right? The old joke. So, so this is long term. Actually, there is no other way that people in the long term will see if these outlets it's getting the right information or wrong. If they lose one case, second case, third case, and then they see, well, in the long term, I think that, well, most of the people are trying to steer into, and I hope it will work, that they will steer towards the media that they can trust. I think trust, this is the most important capital you can have in media, and if you're distrustful, then people won't read you.
They come and they go. Okay, unless there are no more really pressing questions, I'd like to, first of all, thank the panel for a very interesting conversation. I think that we could continue going deeper and deeper and deeper into any one of the many topics that we covered. And I certainly learned a lot. Just any quick comments, closing remarks, please, I give you all a chance to say something more.
Well, I decided to give you like 4 rules. I won't give you any lessons. You have your things. There are 5 basic things which I stick to, and I sort of rewrote it for the needs of that panel. So 5 points code for me is one of the things is have a message for journalists and NGOs. One thing, have a message. In the modern world, all these technicalities are very important, but the basic thing when you're doing something is have a message. If you have a message, then you get through. If you know why you're doing something, then it's going to work. If you're doing something not knowing that, it won't work. Second, for journalists, follow the readers. This is a very important thing, and even more important in the modern era of internet, when actually you're fighting for every single person reading your text. And you can see in your Google Analytics how many people exactly are reading that. So follow the reader. Ask the question he asks, follow his needs, what he might need. This is second one. Third, take care of your income. Without your own income, you won't survive. I mean, there might be people who give you the money, but as it was said in Aeneida, beware of the Greeks even when they're bringing you something, right? It's better to have your own economic, it's the crucial, not better, it's crucial to have your economic base. Well, 4, do your stuff and do the things you need to do. I mean, the environment can be difficult, but you just do your stuff, and then you see that sometimes sky is the limit. And the 5th thing, which I started with, it's nothing that's done forever. Things can always backslide. So don't take things for granted. And these are 5 rules which I follow. Maybe you find them helpful.
I want to thank Freedom House for hosting us today. I want to thank my colleagues in the panel also. And in the end, I want to address a message to all the journalists present here in the room, because I know they work in hard conditions every day. They also have to face censorship. They have to take a lot of crap, to say so, from the authorities. And I want to encourage you to have courage and do your job as best as you can. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for Freedom House and all those donors actually who supported this event. I think that it's important not only because it's very important to try to ensure the independence and freedom of expression and independence of the media in all our countries, but also it's very important to do this through exchanging, to meet each other, to actually look to each other's faces and eyes. It's really very important to feel how journalists are feeling in many different regions in the world. So, but I have a bad news here, because, you know, actually we will never get full freedoms in journalism and in media, because it's a constant fight. And we have to fight every day despite of the more or less democratic country. It's just a question of the level of this fight. And for this fight, we always need brave, dedicated and professional people in all our countries. And let me also make another remark. If you are interested in Armenian Revolution and the role of the media in Armenian Revolution and how people became a media, I will leave this small card with the address of our webdoc project, multimedia project, which Media Initiative Center produced, and I will be very happy if you will look on it. There is an English version also. Thank you.
Thanks. So what I want to say in the end, that we should always talk to each other. We should not judge each other according to our political view, according to our nationality, according to our age and gender, and that's all. So each person should be responsible for their own activity, not only for activity of group he belongs. That's, I think, really important to remember, because in our world everything changed so fast, and you can't even imagine that things that happened right now, we can't even imagine it 10 years ago. It's also about digital revolution, it's also about, in some cases, political revolution. So our world changed so fast, and it's really important to talk with each other, to look in the face of each other, and remember that all your potential enemies is also your potential friends. Maybe it's okay. Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way this discussion went. I think it's time for lunch, so we will come back at what time?
I think at 2:30.
At 2:30. Please come back.
2:30.
Okay, at 2:30, and otherwise, enjoy your lunch. Thank you.